Hello, everybody. I guess we'll get started with our alumni speaker series. And I just wanted to welcome all of you to the first of our online alumni speaker series here at Waterloo Engineering. My name is Mary Wells, and I am the new Dean of Engineering. I'm also going to be the moderator for today's discussion, which I think is promising to be full of insight and inspiration, as well as knowledge that we can all take with us in these very unprecedented times. The goal of this online speaker series is to highlight what Waterloo engineers are doing to make a positive impact on everything from the current COVID-19 pandemic that we're in right now to economy and to the rise and use of robots in a post-pandemic world. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about how Waterloo engineers are contributing their technology solutions to some of the most specific COVID-19 challenges we face. And at this point in time, I think I'll just start to introduce our panel speakers. The first panel speaker, and you can see their picture on the picture in front of you, is Sheldon Fernandez. Sheldon is a 2001 computer engineering alumnus and CEO of DarwinAI, a company that was founded in 2018 by Professor Alexander Wong, who is a Canada Research Chair in Artificial Intelligence and Medical Imaging here at the University of Waterloo in our Systems Design Engineering department, and one of the top experts in Canada related to this. Sheldon received the University of Waterloo's Faculty of Engineering Young Alumni Achievement Medal for his professional and humanitarian endeavors. Lucky for us, he comes back to Waterloo Engineering often to speak to our students on artificial intelligence, where his talks are extremely popular with both the students and the faculty. So I just want to thank Sheldon so much for giving his time today to share his knowledge with us. The second panelist is a professor in Waterloo Engineering, Professor Marc Aucoin. He is a professor of chemical engineering at Waterloo, where he also earned 2 of his 3 degrees. Marc specializes in biochemical engineering, particularly in cell culture engineering for the production of complex biologics, which has led to many industry collaborations in the area of virus inactivation and virus control. These days, Marc is working on a multidisciplinary team, including the School of Pharmacy, that is focused on developing a DNA-based vaccine for COVID-19, which is of particular relevance to what we're going to be discussing today. This vaccine would be delivered using a nasal spray and serve as a therapeutic, as well as stimulating the body to build immunity to COVID-19. Our third panelist is Ryan Denomme, founder and CEO of Nicoya Lifesciences. Ryan and this company is a worldwide leader in providing advanced analytical instruments that help scientists better understand diseases and develop drugs to treat them. Ryan graduated in 2010 from the Nanotechnology engineering program and completed his master's in mechanical engineering just a couple of years later at Waterloo as well. He earned the Stanford Fleming Award and was awarded the NSERC Alexander Graham Bell Scholarship, as well as the Wynne Nano Fellowship while at Waterloo. Currently, Ryan and his team are focusing their work on developing a portable diagnostic test for COVID-19 called Atlas, which is a single-use disposable device and works by detecting infection by testing for viral proteins and uses smartphone technology to quickly deliver lab quality results. So that's just a little bit about our panelists. Before we start our session, I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of a perspective in terms of what the landscape looks like in terms of how engineers across the country are contributing to COVID-19. And I've had the great privilege of chairing the Public Policy Committee for our Pan-Canada National Deans Council, our Engineering Deans Canada Council. And so as part of this, we thought it would be worthwhile back in May and June to kind of survey all of the faculty of engineering across the country to get a sense of how engineers were contributing to fight COVID-19. And I just wanted to share some of those results with you just to set the stage of the vast ways engineers are contributing to fight COVID-19, and then we'll get into some of the specific questions. And I must say there's huge interest in this, this particular online panel. So we had over 500 registrants that wanted to come and participate. And we also opened up questions in advance. So we received close to 20 questions. So as we get into the questions, I'll first ask a few questions of each of the panelists, and then we'll get right into some of the questions that you have posed as people that would be attending the panel. And if there is time, then we'll get into maybe some more free-form question and answer. We'll see what happens. So if we can just go to the first slide. I just want to give a sense. So this was a survey that was run in May and June, as I said, across the country. And it was interesting to see that when we looked at, all the different faculties of engineering and applied science, almost all of them had researchers that were contributing to fight COVID-19. And so that was really neat to see. And then the other thing that I really enjoyed seeing was when we looked at the disciplines that each of the researchers associated with themselves, this was what the results were. We received, I think, over 300 responses in terms of faculty members that wrote in to say, my work, I'm pivoting my research to adjust it to address COVID-19 and also future pandemics. And this graph right here just shows on the y-axis the discipline that the people that were doing the research associated themselves with, as well as the number of projects. So you can see clearly that it's dominated by mechanical and, as you would expect, biomedical engineering, but we see that the diversity of the different fields of engineering that can contribute to COVID-19 in a variety of different ways. So maybe we can move on to the next slide now. So when we started to look at the areas and the projects the engineering professors were involved in with their students, we really started to group them into a couple of different areas that will frame the talk for today, I think, in terms of some of the areas where we do need a lot of help. And these were really kind of the testing area, testing for COVID-19 and the diagnostics. This went beyond testing to even testing in our environment, whether it be our air quality, but also our water quality, sewage systems, and things like this as markers for COVID-19 in the community. There was also treatment, a lot of research going on related to treatment. This was both in terms of things like personal protective equipment, a lot of work going on face masks, ventilators, finding ways to make low-cost ventilators. So everything related to treating patients that had COVID-19 and helping with that. The third area, as you can expect, where engineers could really contribute to is the area of tracking. How do we track and develop ways to track people and do contact tracing to track the spread of the disease? And again, this both involved AI and models to help track the spread of the disease, but also moving into the environment. How do we track the spread of the disease through some of our environmental markers? And then finally, and I think this is something that really speaks to what engineers do and what their mandate is, looking at the future and the economy, and how do we recover out of COVID-19 in a post-pandemic world to reopen our economies in a very safe way, to reopen our communities in the way that we interact with each other in a very safe way. So that's kind of the four broad areas where we felt that engineering researchers were contributing to. Next slide, please. So again, because engineers like graphs, what we did was we took each of the projects and we kind of classified them in these different ways, just to give you a sense of where, where the research efforts were being applied. And again, so on, overall in the graph, you can see those four areas, but then underneath on the x-axis, you can see kind of those areas subdivided into subgroups. So we kind of assigned a secondary research area to each one. So again, under treatment, you can see by far, the largest contributor in terms of projects was looking at personal protective equipment. Then it was looking at treatment in terms of vaccine development. And again, Professor Aucoin will be speaking about that today. Surfaces, how do we create surfaces that can resist COVID-19 and maintain their cleanliness? And then ventilators. And again, you can see these different areas. In testing, it was really looking at how do we test people to diagnose COVID-19 in a safe way, ranging from both conventional testing techniques, but also using AI and imaging techniques of how someone's coughing to see if these are ways that we can diagnose COVID-19, through to tracking, as I said, spread of it through models and things like this, tracing it, contact tracing, and then spread in our environment. And you can see the large work that our engineering researchers across Canada are also doing around future and the economy. So I think that's it. And hopefully, I just wanted to give you a little bit of perspective of what's going on at a national level. And I think now we'll turn to asking some of the first questions of our panelists and actually allow you to see our panelists. So welcome to the panelists. Again, I just want to thank you on behalf of the Faculty of Engineering for giving your time and sharing your knowledge with our audience today. So thank you so much. So the first question I'm going to ask is for Sheldon. And the question really, Sheldon, is, from your perspective, what do you think the world would look like post-COVID, and what role will artificial intelligence play?
What a great question. Dr. Welch, thank you for having me, and the alumni office as well. Always a pleasure to come back to my alma mater, albeit virtually this time. So what does the world look like post-COVID? I mean, it's a extrapolation like anything. Number one, hopefully we have a new American administration down south. I'll leave the politics there. But actually, you know, begin with a little story about my son. My son is 20 months old, and so has grown up, has spent 25% of his life living in COVID. And, you know, he knows now not to touch other children, not to touch other human beings, other than his parents or other than people who are in the loop. And we were joking that post-COVID, he'll have to unlearn these norms. And so I think the interesting question is, what new norms have developed as a result of COVID that will stay post-COVID? For example, remote work, will it be the standard as opposed to the exception? Will we all just be comfortable working in a completely fluid way where you're completely remote and not interacting with folks in a physical way? Business travel, you know, we used to say that you could not forge new relationships virtually, you had to do them physically, but then you can maintain them virtually. That's changed with COVID. You know, a colleague of mine just raised $13 million for his startup in San Francisco and didn't meet in person one of the investors that contributed to that fund. So if you think about that, I think, you know, we're not sure what norms will change as a result of COVID, but certainly what we are seeing is digital transformation across virtually every single vertical. You know, my wife now will buy clothes from Amazon, and she's comfortable doing that for our child, whereas before she would insist on going and, you know, fitting it and so forth. And so if you think about just digital transformation and the scale that that will, you know, entail post-COVID, AI is going to be at the center of a lot of those systems, and it'll be a ubiquitous part of those systems. And we're seeing that as a small startup in terms of how larger companies engage us, the way that they're thinking about the world post-COVID. You know, we all know IoT, Internet of Things. The latest term that I heard was AIoT, Artificial Intelligence of Things, which is, you know, AI and its capacity to analyze data and come to meaningful insights and surface things of interest to us. That type of thing in the digital realm will be very, very significant. And its capacity to influence that digital transformation and accelerate it, I think, is going to be unparalleled. So, you know, that's what I would say. And hopefully as well, my son is welcome to the, you know, UW Engineering class of 2040 post-COVID. And I'm going to start, you know, advocating for him now. But that's my short answer.
Absolutely. I won't be the dean then, but I'll be his advocate too.
Sounds good.
And you know, when you talked about your son and 25% of his life is being spent in this COVID world, and, you know, he's hesitant to touch other people or come close, that makes me sad a little bit. So we need to find a way to maintain our human relationships with each other. They're the root of who we are as humans. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much, Sheldon. So the next question I'm going to ask is for Marc, related to creating a vaccine. So Marc, what do you feel are the challenges in creating a vaccine, and how can engineers help? And then within that, what are the enabling technologies and innovations engineers can bring to the COVAX effort, which is an international effort to make sure that any COVID-19 vaccine will be equitably distributed, and what your lab is doing along with the School of Pharmacy specifically with that really exciting initiative around the nasal spray.
So yeah, thank you very much for having me on the panel, and thank you for reaching out. For as an alumni, I'm very proud of everything that we do here at the University of Waterloo. So, you know, there are so many different options that can become available for a vaccine. Really, vaccine is a global term, and it doesn't refer to one specific thing. A vaccine in and of itself is something that trains the human body to react to a foreign material, or is the foreign material that is training the body to react, so that when we're actually faced with something like SARS-CoV-2, we can react in a way, our body reacts in a meaningful way that prevents the progression of the disease, or minimizes the impacts of the disease. And so, you know, as engineers, engineers are very much like vaccines in that there are so many different types of engineers. And as you showed in your previous slide, there are so many different types of engineers contributing to the effort. And so really, I'm going to speak to what chemical engineers can do, because that's dear to my heart, and that's what I am. I've been trained completely in chemical engineering, even though I'm biologically slanted. And that is, you know, chemical engineers play a huge role in the design and manufacture of materials. And these materials can be anything from surface coatings and paints, all the way to the development of a material such as the vaccine itself. And so as a whole, chemical engineers can play a huge role in bringing these materials to market. How do we do that? How do we do that in a relevant way, in a cost-effective way? If you think of vaccines and the number of different ways and the number of different vaccines that can exist, there are significant advantages in being able to produce large quantities at a reasonable price, because really we want to be able to get this vaccine out to as many people as possible. And it's not just Canadians that are going to benefit from having a vaccine. It's going to be people from all over the world. And so cost really, even though we don't necessarily think of the costs often here in Canada, because we have a very good healthcare system that usually covers it, other places in the world don't have that luxury. And so really being able to manufacture vaccines in a cost-effective way is extremely important. And that's one thing that we're actually looking at with respect to our vaccine project that is actually DNA based. So there are many ways to go ahead and teach the body. But one way that we've decided to focus on is to produce the instruction set. And so that's a strand of DNA that will enable the body to actually make its own vaccine. And so we want to deliver that DNA and get cells in the human body to produce proteins that will come together, self-assemble into what's called a virus-like particle. It's something that looks like a virus, and I often say in class, it smells like a virus and it tastes like a virus. I have no idea whether or not they smell or taste like a virus, because you can't really taste and smell viruses, but they're essentially everything that a virus is, except the nasty parts, and that is the viral instruction set that tells that the virus uses to tell the body to make lots of copies of them and invade your entire system. So the instruction set that we're going to send to the body is one that's only making only for the making of these proteins that make something that looks like the virus and can teach the body how to defend against what looks like the virus without getting it to multiply and cause the disease. And so that's our strategy. And we think it's a good strategy because actually making DNA is actually quite cost effective. And so it's one of the better products from a manufacturing perspective, because we can make lots of it and we can purify it quite easily. And so from that perspective, that's a great idea. Now, in terms of a nasal spray, I think everybody agrees that facing the thought of getting a needle is not fun. And there's a lot of people that refuse to get vaccinated because of the fact that they're getting a needle. And so if we can actually develop a vaccine that can be delivered, administered through a nasal spray, it makes a lot of sense, because there's going to be a lot more acceptance. Not only that, but we'll be able to reach smaller communities that can essentially administer themselves in those communities, as opposed to requiring somebody else to give the needle to the person. And not only that, but the fact is, the disease that we're going after right now, COVID-19, is one that affects the lungs, right? And so one of the things that we want to make sure is that we're actually causing an immune reaction where we want the immune reaction to take place. If we actually insert it into the bloodstream, or if we jab it into our arm, we're going to be getting a different immune response than if we're actually targeting the tissues of the lung or the mucosal layer of the body. And we're hoping that the nasal spray will actually induce a better immune response, one that induces a specific type of antibodies that will be the most likely to neutralize SARS-CoV-2 right at the spot of where they're going to infect humans. And so, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
That's great, Marc. Thank you so much. It's such an exciting project. So, and I do like the idea of a nasal spray, and maybe we can even disperse it in the environment so it's easier to vaccinate people. I'm not sure, because I think one of the challenges will be scalability. How do we get enough vaccine to vaccinate everybody in the world and make sure that it's equally distributed so that the people that need it the most get it the first? So thank you so much. That's wonderful. So the next question I'm going to ask is for Ryan. And the first question is going to be, why do you, from your perspective, why has it been so challenging to develop and meet testing needs? You know, when this first started, people were getting tested, it was taking 5 or 6 days in order for them to get the results back. That seems to have changed a little bit now, so that it's down to a lot less time. But if you can just comment on that, first of all. And then secondly, what role will engineers play in the COVID pandemic going forward in terms of supply chain, logistics, quality control, testing, and again, thinking about it from kind of an economic recovery perspective?
Yeah, definitely. Those are some great questions, Mary. Thanks again for having me on the panel. I've been doing so many UW panels recently. I feel like I'm an employee there now.
Except not getting paid by us.
Yeah. Get some good water bottles out of it though, so that's good. No, but yeah, those are some really good questions. And you know, just like sort of a personal story related to this is, you know, the testing turnaround time is like super important. You know, for us, we have, you know, 20 or so people that are working every day in the office, you know, to get critical products out the door for our customers. And, you know, if one of them just feels like a little bit sick, they have maybe 1 or 2 symptoms of COVID, you know, the policy is they have to stay at home until they get a negative test. So this means like on any given week, we probably have at least 1 or 2 people that are out for the entire week, just waiting on what everyone's pretty confident is going to be a negative result. But, you know, we have to be on the safe side. And, you know, if this is happening in my company, it's obviously happening in many other companies as well. So 3 to 5 day turnaround time, if that's kind of like a rolling, you know, rolling turnaround time that happens, you know, for the next 6 months, it's definitely going to be tough to get businesses back on their feet, because that's a really challenging dynamic situation to deal with as a business owner. But yeah, I think, you know, looking at why testing has been so challenging to ramp up to the scale that's really needed to, you know, to have like a 1 day turnaround, for example. I think there's a few issues. I mean, the first is just like the sheer volume of tests is really like unfathomable. How many tests are being, you know, recommended be run. You know, PCR is the main technique that's being used for these tests today. So polymerase chain reaction. You know, this is a research tool. I mean, this was never really like meant to be a diagnostic tool on the scale of tens or hundreds of millions. Obviously, like lots of companies have done an amazing job like adapting it to be able to be used at that kind of scale, but you know, there's just never really like the intention of the technology. And so inherently there's like some problems with it. You know, it's kind of slow. It's really easy to have, you know, false positives or negatives based on cross-contamination and challenging, you know, collection methods. So, you know, on top of not having existing infrastructure and good enough supply chain to hit, you know, the testing targets we need, it's been a really big challenge trying to ramp up to to these levels. So, you know, we see the 3 to 10 day turnaround time in the US. It's much worse obviously than here. So they're seeing 10 to 14 days in some states, which there's no point in even getting tested if that's the turnaround time. So so, you know, that's super challenging. If you put it in perspective, you know, in the US, there's like probably 20 or 25 million pregnancy tests done every year. The recommended testing rate in the US is anywhere from, you know, 20 million tests a day to 20 million tests a week. So, you know, comparing to something like a pregnancy test that's used pretty frequently, you know, and they're only doing 20 million a year. You know, obviously, if you're talking about that kind of scale up, it's going to be super, super challenging to meet those testing levels. And I think that's what this ends up being is, this is like one of the biggest scale up challenges we've faced as a society and as engineers. And Marc touched on it briefly about, just the scale of, vaccine that you're going to need to produce to be able to give this to every single person that needs it. That alone is going to be a massive challenge. This stuff doesn't usually happen in this shorter period of time. So, we've seen like some really good responses from the Engineeirng standpoint on some other products like ventilators and face shields and face masks and sanitation tools. And I think we've seen some like really fast turnaround times on coming up with some really amazing engineering solutions to make these types of products more quickly available. But the problem with diagnostics and vaccines as well is like, it's just very complex. These aren't easy products to engineer and manufacture. So it just takes a lot of time. I mean, I've been in this field for 10 years and we've got a lot of people at Nicoya that have been in this field for a long time. And we've got all the people and resources to make these tests, but still it's a huge amount of work to get to the point where you have a test that's good enough for this application. So I think there's also other issues outside of just the technical complexity. There's also some like regulatory hurdles involved with this too, because a lot of the tests like that Nicoya is looking at developing and other companies are looking at developing are tests that would be done outside of the labs. These would be more point of care tests that could be done in a clinic or even at a workplace or in someone's home. And the idea is that you could do these tests very frequently, every day or every week, and they'd be low cost and very easy to read out the result. So you wouldn't need to have a medical professional present to do these tests. But the problem is, these tests are being held to the same standard as a PCR test is in a lab in terms of the sensitivity and the specificity that you need to hit. And that's not really the case for an at-home test that you're doing every single day. You don't need to have the same result quality because you're just testing so much. You're going to catch the virus anyway. So I think that's a bit of a regulatory challenge. Is some of these tests are probably ready for the market, but everyone's a little bit afraid to maybe push the envelope a bit and get them delivered into people's hands. But I think that is a problem that is solved fairly easily once there's a few more maybe examples of it being done successfully, maybe other countries. But overall, I think, again, Engineeirng has a huge role to play in developing tests, whether it's the core fundamental technology being used, to build a COVID-19 diagnostic, or it's in the manufacturing scale up, or it's in the logistics side. I mean, there's just so many huge problems here. And I mean, that is what engineers do. They solve complex, difficult problems. So if, everyone should be super excited to try and dig in and, try and find solutions to these really, really challenging problems that also, have huge impact on the world. So, if people are looking for really specific ways to get involved, Nicoya is hiring a lot of people right now. So go check out our careers page.
Oh, good. That sounds exciting. So
yeah.
I just see somebody's just asked sort of a follow-up question. I might just stick with you just for a second, Ryan.
Sure.
From your perspective, do you think it's better to have a quick, fast at-home tests that are sort of $1, but they may only have 20% accuracy versus, a more expensive test that's taking a longer period of time and things like that? So you've touched on a little bit in terms of we don't need the level of accuracy if you're testing all the time at home, but I don't know if you want to add anything else to that. That was a question from the audience that just came through.
For sure. Yeah, that's a good question. I think you always, you need to have both for sure. There's times in which like you need to do a test and you need to be 99% sure of the result at that point in time. Like if someone's presenting to the ER with, a lot of COVID symptoms, but you're not for sure what they have, like you need to know right away what the reason is for those symptoms, because it could be many other things. And if you start treating it like COVID and it's not, that's not going to be very successful from a clinical outcome standpoint. So for those cases, definitely you want to have very high performing assays. But if you're talking about something where, if on day one of the infection, the lab test would pick it up, but the home test wouldn't, but on day two, the home test would pick it up, that's, in my opinion, a way better solution, because if the turnaround time for a lab test is 3 to 5 days, the home test is still doing way, way, way better. Especially because you're going to have a lot higher compliance with a home test versus someone having to like drive to a testing center and get this thing shoved into the back of their brain. Like, it's just like a lot of reasons why people would be like, I feel kind of sick, but I don't want to go and get the test. So I think compliance would be much higher with a home test, even if it's a little bit less accurate.
Right, I agree with you. The trying to control human behavior in that way. So so that's good. Thank you so much, Ryan. That was great.
Yeah.
So those were some of the introductory questions that we had kind of formulated, and I'm going to now move to some of the questions we did receive from the audience that was participating in terms of things they were interested in. So the first question, and they've kind of curated it to certain people, but again, if other panelists want to jump in to add, that's fine. So the first question I'm going to direct to Sheldon because it does relate to AI. But the question is, what are some of the challenges involved with creating what are called VLPs, or virus-like particles? So I don't know if you could answer that question. We might have to turn to Marc for a vaccine. But where you can answer, I think, is what ways do you see AI being used to address them?
Yeah, so I'll try. And given Marc's background, I think he could probably add a lot of color to the solution.
Yes.
I often do that. I as CEO of the company, and maybe Ryan will sympathize. I answer on a certain level, and then I defer to the people that really do it. But we have some pharma clients, and what they tell us is that the biggest challenge with VLPs is knowing how the topology or material composition, whether it's naturally occurring or synthesized, will behave in the body, and whether it'll trigger the right antibodies. And so where there's the real potential for AI, and we see this, is really as a powerful predictive tool to predict the potential bioactivity of certain topologies and materials. If you look at where deep learning, the most powerful apparatus of AI has excelled, it's really looking at, vast amounts of data and, extracting from that data correlations that just would be too complex for the human mind to grapple with. And so that is the potential that we see. And we're already seeing this activity. I mean, pre-COVID, AlphaGo, the company, DeepMind, the company that made AlphaGo back in 2016, made quite a bit of waves in the community when they, took part in a protein folding contest for, mechanical prediction, and really performed in a way that was order of magnitude better than comparative techniques. So when it comes to predictive capabilities and huge amounts of data, it's a tool for the human, I think, to determine these properties in a much more accelerated way. That's my answer, Marc. I'm very curious as to your perspective.
Do you want to add anything, Marc, to that?
You know what? I think you did an exceptional job, because I think that's really the challenge. You see, a protein really is just a string of amino acids or little parts that are glued all together. But a protein is a little bit more complex than just that string, right? It has to fold into some sort of three-dimensional shape, and how it folds is so important. And so if we're trying to create a synthetic protein that's going to be the target of the antibodies and will mimic the virus, we have to make sure that the protein is actually folding, or the synthetic protein is folding the exact same way as how it would fold in the actual virus.
Yeah.
And the thing with these viruses is that they can undergo mutations. And what happens is, when you have a mutation like that, you'll have one of these amino acids, one of these parts of this string, that will actually be changed to another portion. So imagine you had a green bead on a necklace, and you're changing it out for a red bead on that necklace. Well, that green bead and that red bead now cause that necklace to actually change its overall shape. And really trying to guess at how the immune system is going to change when you get these mutations, I think is really, really important. So I think AI has huge potential in that realm.
And Marc, I just want to, sorry, go ahead, Sheldon.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think as engineers, we like putting stuff into a box, and we're like, yes, like, this is the known way that this will behave in this scenario, but biology doesn't work that way, and it's so unpredictable, and it can you know, like Mark said, just basically evolve over time. And I think that's a huge area where AI can help, you know, compress these timelines. So.
Thank you. And so I guess the next question I'll direct towards Mark. There's been a lot of questions that have come in around vaccine and immunity. I have questions myself, but and it speaks a little bit to what you were talking about just now around how the disease mutates. But if you think about the immunity you get from getting and recovering from COVID-19, would that be different from the immunity you would get from a vaccine? So for example, would you have to get multiple doses of the vaccine to get that same immunity? And then, you know, if COVID-19 is mutating, would you continue to be immune in the future?
So not necessarily. In fact, most vaccines actually target what is known as the humoral system or the antibody response. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the body to generate antibodies against the virus so that it actually neutralizes. So these antibodies, what they're going to do is they're going to essentially come around and attach itself to the outside of the virus, and then the virus can't actually do what it needs to do, which is to get into the cells. But that's only one branch of the whole immune system, right? And so what we're hoping is that is enough, but it's not necessarily enough. And especially with COVID, we're not exactly sure, you know, there's not enough evidence yet to actually say if this response, the antibody response, is actually enough to protect you against COVID. And so sometimes you need other aspects, cell-mediated defense, where you really need the entire virus to go through its cycle of infection to teach the body. And so you might not get the same type of immune response with a vaccine than you would with just any vaccine, right? And so that's one of the reasons we're actually doing the approach that we're doing, and we're getting the body to make those proteins in the cells of the body, as opposed to presenting them with the protein directly, because by getting the cells to make that protein, we're hoping to get an enhanced immune response that is more global of a response.
And so, Mark, do they know now, for someone that has had COVID-19 and recovered from it, are they immune to getting it again? Is that question being definitively answered, or?
Definitively, no.
No, okay.
I think there's evidence that suggests that they mount a strong immune response, and it's not likely that they'll get reinfected, but the timelines are so short, right? I mean, really, we only started really delving into this 4 months ago. And so it's not clear, okay? And really, although, you know, what we're doing is great, and that's collecting a lot of evidence and doing a lot of testing, which is getting us a lot of evidence, the studies so far are small, right? The ones that are published and that are rigorous are small. And so we really can't, we have to be careful. And especially as scientists, we have to be very careful as to what these studies actually mean. Beware, because the media is taking every single bit of sensational storytelling to kind of position all the different stories that are coming out. So be careful.
And Mark, I'm just going to follow up on that again, because there's just one question that's come through in this session, just asking, is herd immunity a viable way to control COVID?
Yes.
In your opinion, you do believe it is?
Well, I do.
Okay, all right. It just means, well, everybody getting it then, or whatever, or 70% of us or something being exposed to it or something.
That's right.
So,
you can only get the virus if it's present, and you can only spread the virus if it infects a person. So if it can't spread, then the virus can't go anywhere, and so that's pretty much the idea, right? If most of the population is protected, the virus can't go anywhere, and then it dies out.
Okay, good. So another question has come through, and I guess maybe again, Mark, we'll start with you, but then I don't know if Sheldon or Ryan want to comment. What alternatives to vaccination are under consideration globally right now? Are there any, or is it really we're all waiting for the vaccine to be created, or?
Well, you either get everybody infected, and so that's one alternative. It's just I guess sort of the U.S. strategy right now.
I was going to say that, Mark, but I didn't want to. So thanks.
Mark said it.
It's a slightly dangerous strategy.
Yeah.
There's also the idea of keeping everybody quarantined, right? Minimizing, do what we're doing, social distancing, make sure that that we are not creating the reservoirs of virus that we can be.
Okay.
And then there's vaccination, and really in my humble opinion, vaccination is probably the most effective way to proceed.
Yeah, okay, thank you. The next question that came in from before the panel started from some of the people that were attending was, if a vaccine is essentially dead or disabled or fragments of a virus, they didn't really understand how there could be side effects or concerns about the vaccine in terms of the reaction you might have as a person having that vaccine. It is clear that a given vaccine might not be effective, but what could actually make a vaccine unsafe for somebody in terms of the way their bodies might react to a vaccine?
Ryan or Sheldon, do you want to take it, or do you want...
Here, I think I don't.
I'm looking to learn, Mark. So yeah.
With a vaccine, what you're doing is you're trying to teach the body how to react, right? And so you're injecting a foreign material into the body. Your body's not happy, right? You are not taking this in stride and saying, hey, you know what? There's this stuff that you just injected into me, or that you made me sniff, and I'm okay with it. The body is reacting. The body is mounting a defense, and that defense can, in and of itself, be dangerous, right? So there's, the defense can cause headaches and fevers and stuff like that. That's just a reaction to a foreign material to the body. But there's also the fact that you can actually overreact to a foreign material, and that's also a dangerous thing. So these are side effects. They're rare, right? But the hope is on the grant, like taking into account how many people are actually being vaccinated, that these side effects are small compared to what the effect of the virus could be. Or yeah.
Okay. And this is just a question that's come through now kind of in real time. What is a feasible timeline for the vaccine to hit market? I know there's a lot of testing going on in Russia now, and we hear about these smaller tests that are going on, but when we think about a broader vaccine being available for people, is it just going to be a scalability issue in terms of making enough? But what's your sense of a timeline for that?
If everything works out, if all the trials are
successful,
positive,
yeah,
and that there is some evidence that it's not going to hurt people, it could be early in the new year. But I think that there's always going to be hiccups. And so the likelihood is that you're not going to have it until probably the end of next year, if we can get positive responses. The good thing is that we have some really great companies that have been making vaccines for a long time, and they've got platforms ready to go, and they've got ways to make vaccines. And so, I mean, we're hoping that our vaccine will be successful, but the likelihood is that a lot of these larger pharmaceutical companies will be the ones to reach market first, really. And they've got the things in place. Whether or not they have enough to make enough for the entire world, That's yet to be seen.
Well, and that's what I think one of the issues, scalability. Now, when you think about your nasal spray, where are you at? Are you testing now with human subjects, or where are you guys at in the process?
So we're about a month and a half to the first animal trials.
Okay, so you start with animals and then make sure that looks good, and then
Actually,
then you move into
before
humans.
that, it's everything is starts in the lab,
Okay.
and so we work with cell cultures and make sure that those results are promising first. And once we have those results that are promising, then we move to the next level. And hopefully, we've done all the testing necessary to make sure that what we're producing is safe.
Right, of course, yes.
So the expectation is that when we go to higher levels, you know, what we're producing is safe. If it's not, that's when we'll have to stop.
Right,
But,
okay.
you know, the idea is that we're gathering the information to make sure that what we're doing is safe and that works.
That's great, wonderful. I'm going to give you a little break, Mark, and maybe ask a couple of questions that Ryan may be more able to answer, so you can grab a drink of water or something. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. So, Ryan, when will we be able to get blood serum tests to check for antibodies, and why does the government healthcare system seem so opposed to this? This is one of the questions that came in during the past week.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's already like a number of serum tests available for COVID-19 antibodies, whether it's like in a lab or, you know, bought as like a off-the-shelf sort of lateral flow type of assay. So for sure, I mean, from a technical standpoint, you know, the tests exist. I think the reason why there's been a bit of a slower, you know, uptake, or there's been the government's been a bit slower to advise on this is kind of what Mark touched on. Like, we don't have a ton of evidence beyond 3 or 4 months of time. So if we test somebody and they're positive for COVID-19, and then, you know, a few weeks goes by, they get better, and we test them for antibodies and they don't have antibodies. This has happened in a fairly large number of cases. You know, clearly we're not totally understanding what's going on with the body's immune response to the virus. And even people that have tested positive to having the antibodies, you know, looking at how that level of antibody changes over time is super important, because you need to understand at what point, you know, are you either potentially, you know, not immune anymore, or are you immune but the antibody levels are below the detectable limits. So I think, you know, the real fear is giving people a false sense of security and making them think that they're, you know, immune to the virus, and then they actually aren't. So I think that's probably the main reason why. And I think as we get more evidence to support, you know, from a clinical side, what these antibody levels mean, you'll see more and more tests available, and it will be more commonly used. But I think right now we're still in a place where the priority is testing for the live infection, and then a lot of active infection. A lot of the resources are going towards that right now. But I think we will see, you know, with more and more evidence, the use of antibody tests fairly effectively.
Okay, great, thanks. And maybe one more question for you, Ryan, and then I think I'll just open up some general questions that came in that anybody can try and answer. But from your perspective, Ryan, has testing reliability improved? And do you have any sense of what the false reporting rates are currently?
Yeah, it's a good question too. I mean, I definitely think, at least qualitatively, the testing reliability has improved. Just as like the kits have gotten better, you know, as the infrastructure has gotten better, and for the protocols, definitely, I think it has improved. I think there still is like a decently high like false positive rate, but that's just that's going to happen when you're testing, you know, hundreds of thousands of people every day. Like, even a small false positive or false negative rate ends up being a pretty big deal. So
especially the false negatives they're the bigger deal.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I think it's just it's gonna be hard to get those up to like 100%. It's not really possible, but I think that's what's helpful about being able to test multiple times. You can really reduce the impact of those false positive and negative rates by having multiple tests. But that's, again, hard to do if you're already at a 3 to 5 day turnaround. So.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I think I'll move to some general questions that came in. And again, I'll, let me know if you feel you want to answer the question to each of the panelists. I'm not going to direct this towards anyone, but one of the questions that came in, which I wonder myself, is, from in your opinion, will we ever live mask-free from COVID-19 when we don't have a vaccine available, or will, and from what everything public health tells us, this is the safest thing we can do in terms of making sure we don't transmit the disease to one another in an unintended way. So what's your sense? Will masks be the new norm until a vaccine is developed?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah.
Right.
I mean, they're probably one of the easiest things for people to do to drastically reduce infection rates. So until, we have a vaccine and are able to really eradicate, COVID-19, I don't see a world in which we're not, wearing masks when we're at least inside public places. I personally think that's not a lot to ask of people for, the pretty positive impact it could have. But
yeah, no, I agree. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in. I think we see a difference between Canada and the US, where Canadians, for the most part, seem to be abiding by what the public health is recommending in terms of this, where in the States, there seems to be a lot of dissension around individual rights to do what they want to do versus, and maybe lack of trust in their own public health and their government in terms of not even believing maybe there is COVID-19 is real and stuff. So it's just such a contrast in terms of the way the communities have embraced what their governments have told them. So, okay, so the next one is really, how do we balance the potential benefits of engineering solutions with the potential impediments to social interactions and productivity that may also result? This may involve conscious risk-benefit assessments to ensure we aren't over-engineering our lives. So in terms of, again, Sheldon, I think of your little boy that's just being born. We don't want him, we want him to be somewhat free. And as we think of children and things going back into elementary schools in the fall, how do we balance those tensions between wanting people to be safe, yet not wanting to constrain the way people live too much? And that's maybe more a philosophical question.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that we're grappling with. My wife's a psychiatrist, and one of the things they're learning is the impact on mental health that social isolation and so forth has had on people. And at what point do you balance the risk of social isolation and so forth versus one's own mental health?
Right.
And we're grappling with this as an organization, as a company. We've had our office closed for 5 months, and we see people, especially those without kids or partners, really struggling with the isolation that it's exacted on them. So it's a question that I think is going to get increased attention, especially as this period of isolation and social distancing elongates. One of the questions also is, how can technology assist us in breaking down some of those barriers? Like, of course, a Zoom call like this is never as effective as us being in person and seeing one another and so forth. But to what extent can AI and other forms of digital medium try to at least quasi-replicate some of the connection that we have in person? And so it's a really important question, and one that I think we'll increasingly have to turn to as the reality of the pandemic becomes a little bit longer than we anticipated. And I agree with Marc in terms of timeline for a vaccine and what we have to do in the meantime. And so it's going to be a careful balance, but one I think you're going to see a lot of attention paid to in the next couple months at least.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, for Waterloo Engineering, our students are going to be online in the fall. I miss seeing them around here. I wish they could be here, but universities are probably going to be one of the last places to open up, because there's, that's what universities do. We bring people together from all over the world to come together to think about ideas, to talk about ideas, to learn from each other. So, I feel so terrible that our first years won't get that experience of a first year engineering student, but we're trying, like you said, through technology to try and, as much as we can, connect with them and things.
One of the things we miss is what we call the serendipitous interaction, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Being in the office, walking by the water cooler, seeing somebody that you normally don't talk to and striking up a conversation that's actually productive. So we've tried things like Zoom matching people randomly for 5 minutes. And it doesn't always work, like, because we're on Zoom so much, the last thing you want to do is have another virtual conversation forced on you, but we're trying. And I think we need to think of creative ways to do that type of thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's true.
Yeah, I always think about this in terms of like, what things have been done historically that are sort of similar to this. And I think one that's interesting is like seatbelts. Like everyone hated seatbelts at first, and it was like, I don't want to do this. Like, I can't believe the government's forcing me to wear a seatbelt. Like, it's my choice. But now everyone wears a seatbelt, and it's like so much better for everyone. And I think the important thing is like, you don't just wear seatbelts if it's like raining or a snowstorm. Like, you wear seatbelts all the time. So I think with like a lot of these, these measures, like wearing a mask, like having much better, hygiene, being more careful when you are feeling sick from infecting others. I think all those things are just like, regardless of COVID-19, are in general very good things for us to think about as a society to just reduce in general, like the spread of viruses and sicknesses, and obviously, future potential pandemics as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't believe you were alive when you couldn't have seatbelts, Ryan. I know I was, but I don't think you were, because I remember as a kid, we didn't wear seatbelts, but I think you're quite a bit younger than me. Anyway, so here's another question that's come in just in this session now in real time is, and I guess I'll just throw it out there. What is your perspective on Russia claiming they have a vaccine already? And is it likely that they have a safe vaccine available? And I know I'm wondering that same question myself in terms of what they're claiming, what they're doing. Is this just really one way of doing some mass testing to see what happens? So maybe Marc, I'll start with you as the vaccine and chemical engineer and with a biology background.
I think you're on mute, Marc.
I think you're on mute, Marc.
Oh, sorry, Marc. I think you're on mute. There we go.
I don't think that Canada has the monopoly on the ability to produce vaccines. You hope that what is being advertised is the truth. I mean, if Russia does have a vaccine, that's fantastic. That's fantastic for the world, because it means that there's something there that's possible. We don't know if they would share that vaccine or not, but at least there would be hope that a vaccine could be created. So, I mean, I think it's a positive thing. I hope that it's the truth, and I hope it's not just hype. We're gonna have to wait and see.
Okay.
That's all I can say.
I don't know, Ryan or Sheldon, if you've got, I don't know much about this myself. Is it the truth or not? I don't know. So.
Yeah, it's hard to speculate with, there's no, to my knowledge anyway, there's no scientific journal articles published about the studies that have been done with the vaccine. So it's just, very little transparency into the underlying science. So it's pretty hard to comment on whether it's real or just, hype for other reasons.
Yeah. But... Okay, fair enough. Another question that's come up is, we haven't really talked yet about viral disinfection, especially of surfaces and things, and how long the virus is lasting on these surfaces. Given the concern regarding enclosed spaces, any comments on approaches to air purification, cleaning of these surfaces, disinfecting systems, approaches, what are things that we can do? I know there's been a lot of work when I looked at that engineering research survey around developing new coatings for surfaces that will kind of self-disinfect and things. Again, they're kind of more in the research phase right now, but they look very promising. I don't know if any of you have any direct experience on that or can make a comment.
Yeah, I mean, I think from everything I've seen, like in terms of viruses on surfaces and then, transmission through contact is not like that high or not that likely as of a medium for transmitting the virus. But I definitely think in terms of like ventilation systems and, air purification systems, there's probably a lot of potential there. I think that's like super interesting, and it does seem to be, the primary form of transmission is through, close contact with people talking and breathing and not having high turnover in terms of air exchange. And if you look at like an average workplace or a house compared to like a hospital in terms of the turnover rates of air, it's much, much higher, like probably 10 or 15 times higher in a hospital. So I think there could be some very interesting solutions from an engineering standpoint to improve, HVAC systems in workplaces, houses, public spaces to help reduce the spread.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark. And then they're just telling me it's 2 p.m. in big letters now, so that I got too caught up in things. So I'll leave the last word to Mark, and then I think we'll end it. I apologize for going a little bit over.
Well, the fact is that there's not a lot of viral studies. A lot of work has been on antibacterial coatings and antibacterial surfaces, and so there's very little work that really shows how these materials can actually work against viruses. And one of the reasons is because of how you need to test these, and really you have to somehow recover the virus and then apply it to a host to be able to test it. And it's very, very difficult to kind of determine how much virus is actually there. But copper seems to be playing a huge role in disinfectant surfaces.
Okay.
And so you'll probably see a lot more copper coated or copper alloys in the market because it seems to have this biocidal effect. That's probably something that we'll see in the future.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we'll end the panel now. We're just after 2 p.m. I just want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much. I learned a lot from the session, and I think our audience did as well. And I just want to thank our audience members for joining us. I think we had over 200 at one point. So I think that you gave them a lot of new knowledge and information around questions that are, really important to them and stuff. So thank you so much. And thank you to our audience for joining and attending this session. And I think we're just going to start to share screen. Thank you for attending. And again, there's just a website at the bottom there, and to find out more events and our alumni speaker series if you want. And I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but I forgot. We did record this session, so it will be put up onto our website so if you wanted to go back and review anything, and for people that couldn't attend the session, they can go and see kind of this question and answer session. But thank you so much to all of our alumni for sharing your knowledge and expertise. It was really wonderful. And I'm really looking forward to the next alumni speaker series now. So
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And thank you, everybody in the audience. Have a great day. Stay safe, everybody. And I look forward to meeting all of you in person at some point in the future once we've got a vaccine and everybody's safe.